Hello and welcome. I'm here with Tom Eckert, and we are going to be talking about numerology. Actually, probably, in fact, Tom, going into the depths of numerology, I feel is going to be a little bit of where we're going to be venturing. So, thank you for joining. You are in Berlin currently, Germany.
Right. Yeah, thank you for having me, Tara. What a joy.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to this. So, you and I had a conversation before jumping into this, and I've really been looking forward to having this talk on numerology. And for those out there, I'm sure those listening, watching, I'm going to be posting this on YouTube as well. I'm a big fan of numerology, and I probably came across it before maybe 4 or 5 years, 4 years ago, probably, when I was really searching for answers within myself. And that was really not in the best place. And I came across, actually, it was a numerology app, I believe. And I started playing around with it, playing around with my numbers, and it really shed light on so many difficulties that I was facing. And it really helped me get through some really challenging times. And then fast forward to about, I think it was 2.5 years ago, I came across your podcast, which really, it was the podcast I think that I listened to, the first one was the 27/9
Oh,
episode.
seriously. Oh,
Yes,
nice.
and
That's sweet. Okay.
it was so touching and it was so moving, and it really helped me understand myself more, even more. And I find that when we go through these times of uncertainty, or we're looking for answers, or maybe not even looking, just in a place of confusion, and the synchronicities show up and you stumble upon content piece, or for me it was your podcast, and it really helped me understand a lot about myself. And I just have such a very, I would say, genuine interest in numerology, especially after our conversation, how deep you can go with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the depths and maybe some of the shadow aspects, some of the transformative aspects of working with numerology. But first, I'd love for you to just go into what numerology is for those listening. Maybe if someone happens upon this and they don't know what numerology is, the beauty of it, the value of it. And I'd also love to learn where you started studying numerology and what got you into it.
Okay. Wow. It's a big question, like what is numerology? Um, I have to think like where to kind of like how to tackle this interesting question. I mean, on the most, practical side, numerology is an ancient methodology, using one's full name and date of birth, basically converting letters into numbers and using this system to derive and glean a lot of information about the person and their, what we can say, like the purpose that their soul has set into motion in this particular incarnation. And that includes many, many dimensions and facets of life, from the most immediate character to the emotional temperament to the way a person makes choices and even the way they think and the way they handle relationships, what will be a more fitting career path, vocation, even topics like sexuality, or finances, the changing seasons of their life, how every year is going to play out, the opportunities that will open up before them, the things that are maybe less probable to be available at a certain or particular time. So basically, numerology is like what I like to call a GPS for the soul. And that's really what my podcast, right,
Mm-hmm.
is called, because that's really what it is, right? So that's like it's a tool, it's a methodology that really sheds light on your path. You have to walk, right? But it does, give you that bigger picture, um, view on your path. So that's perhaps a beginning, to the answer. Um, and as for um, where it all started, I mean, I'm as per this recording, or the time of this recording, I'm nearly 40, and I would say I started, the spiritual path. I started walking the spiritual path when I was 16. so a long time ago. And I think, I was deeply, deeply immersed and involved in spiritual practice with a spiritual teacher, deep meditative practices, deep self-inquiry, deep energetic practices, very much on a spiritual path aimed at spiritual awakening, liberation, enlightenment, all these words, self-realizations. And I think when I was around 25, I was kind of exposed to numerology, and I met my teacher in Israel. And I remember him giving me this reading, and I felt so deeply seen
Hmm.
and acknowledged. And I was like, how can a person possibly know so much about me just using my full name and date of birth? And the funny thing, Tara, like if you ask me, how does it work? I have no answer. And the funny thing is, and no honest numerologist, and for that sake, even astrologers, nobody knows why it works. It just works. So we don't know the how or the why yet, but it just works, giving so many readings to strangers and seeing, that feedback. So that's pretty much how I kind of like started diving into it. And over the years, became a professional, right? So, and yeah, and nowadays also, I think what I love the most is actually teaching numerology.
Mm-hmm. And you do have a program. We will touch on it on the end at the end where people can reach you, but you're also teaching a program to guide others to learn numerology, correct?
Right. So there's like the self-study course that people can just, purchase as a self-study program if they just want to start kind of dabbling a bit with numerology and getting the basics, the foundation, kind of settled or understood. And there's a path for those who really want to study numerology in depth or potentially make it, their own career. And that's to date, it's like a one-on-one process where I got people from beginner to certified or to even, experts if people want to go that far. Yeah.
And what do you find is the most transformative aspect about numerology? So if someone starts accessing their chart or works with someone, for example, where would you even guide them? What would actually be the greatest transformative areas to focus on in numerology, would you say?
Mm. Um, I would say that that's a very personal question. So first of all, it really depends, and I think that's also the beauty about numerology. It really depends like where you are at a given point in time. So naturally, for example, let's say I meet you for a reading, I would ask you to provide me with, let's say, up to 3 topics or questions that are really burning for you right now. And then I would approach your chart in a way that can give answer to this current state of yours. So that's, a more specific approach to numerology. But let's say you're just, you just encountered numerology for the first time. As a general approach or attitude, I would recommend people to get to know their 3 most central numbers. And these are the life path, the expression number, and the soul urge number. There are more. So I think most numerologists would agree upon like 5 core numbers. So you can add to these the personality number and the birthday number, but I would omit these last 2 and actually focus on these 3: life path, expression number, and soul urge number, because these hold um the most the strongest energetic kind of component that really characterizes who you are. And it's not, and so I would recommend look at these numbers, study them deeply, and if you can, try to study also the interactions between these 3.
Hmm.
If you just do that, if you just do that, it will really give you a very penetrating and illuminating insight into who you are, your deepest energies, your deepest lessons in this lifetime, your deepest potential, your path in many ways, and also maybe some of the fundamental shadows you need to deal with, which is a blessing to know. It's like, I think, knowing the potential and the shadow really constitutes, a full circle.
Totally. Yeah.
So I would
And
really recommend that. Yeah.
yeah, and with that, I tend to, well, I think in the past, even with astrology, my tendency was to look at the gifts. Oh, just tell me how special I am and all my good things about
Right.
myself. And then as I progressed and moved into more of my inner, like really deep inner self-discovery and work, I tended to look at the shadow aspects. Like, what is making me feel this way? What do I need to work on? What do I need to change? Because we have our positive traits and negative traits. And in order to truly shine in our positive traits, we have to understand our negative traits because they both coexist. And if we're out of balance, then we're not going to fully shine our gifts and our traits and those abilities without understanding what might be weighing us down or pulling us back or preventing from doing so. So I mean, astrology has that as well. Everything has its higher and lower
Absolutely.
polarities. And maybe we can talk about the double digits. So when you and I had our intro talk, you
Right.
looked at my chart, which was fun. And that's why I also asked because I didn't have anything I wanted to look at, but you pointed out a couple things that did help me actually by you went
Mm.
deep and I really enjoyed that and I really valued what you had to say and it came from the double digit pairing and the energy that comes from them, so maybe
Sure.
explain.
Wow, that's in a funny way. It's like it's actually very deep to dive. It's like it's a deep dive, like diving to like the double digit that really constitutes a single digit, is actually very advanced material. Um, so just for the audience watching or listening to this episode, to this video or episode, every number, let's take a number like 7. Okay, 7 can be just a pure 7. The 7 can also be made out of 16, 1 plus 6. 7 can be made out of 25, right? 2 plus 5 equals 7, or 34, 3 plus 4, or 43, or 52, etc. So we can say that the 7 single digit has its intrinsic qualities, right? Every 7 is deep, wants to have a deep understanding of every topic, wants to have an ability to penetrate the mysteries of life. They seek after truth and meaning and understanding. There's this analytical capacity that 7 has, a kind of a more abstract way of thinking and approaching things, a very multi-layered kind of psyche and personality. So that's the 7 by and large. But then you have these like subtleties, like the 25-7, let's say, right? The 25-7, you have like this twist of the 2 and the 5, kind of, I would say, almost like bending the 7 energy in a particular direction. So they add their unique, so in the example of 2 and 5, you have that kind of the receptivity of the 2. So it adds this aspect of this intuitive flair. And the 5, the creative, surprising element, the wit, and the freedom, and both 2 and 5 are very malleable. They're very flexible and receptive. There's something more juicy about their combination. So when you start learning numerology a bit more in depth, you start learning number combinations. This is why I'm kind of like a bit cautious, like talking too deep about this, because I don't want to confuse anyone. But so that particular 7 made of 25 is going to be a more flexible type of 7, a more creative type of 7, a more versatile type of 7, because of the 2 and the 5. Whereas other 7s may be a bit more, take 34. Okay, 34, 3 and the 4, there's something that really loves working with materials, okay? 3 and 4. They love being creative, they love being crafty. So that 7 might be a little bit more of a hands-on type of 7. Or if it would be 43, so you would kind of flip the numbers, the 4 is going to be in the tens position. Then it's going to be maybe a 7 that is even more practical or sometimes even more research oriented. The 7 can be also more kind of like strict in their way. So that's what I'm saying, like the 25 really changes that. So the double digit, it doesn't change the fundamental meaning of the single digit, but it gives it a more particular direction, or it extracts out of the number more unique qualities. Does it make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's also like the
Yeah.
parent, the mother, father almost, right? In a way. So you get the child is your, I guess you can look at it. I've heard that terminology
I,
before. Yes, no.
I never heard about that particular
Okay.
approach, but maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Anyway, yeah,
yeah.
no, it's fascinating. And I do tend to I like that behind the core number, what is behind that, what is driving that personality trait or that energy that is supporting that core number of the life path or heart's desire expression soul
Yes, I
urge.
mean,
Yeah.
I just to make it a bit interesting, right? So, if I remember correctly, no, I do remember correctly. You have like a 9 life path.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 9, so 9 is an energy of expansion, especially when positioned, by the way, in the life path position. It really shows something very, very fundamental about the person. Like there's something courageous about people with a 9 in that position, in that location in the chart. And it really matters where the 9 is positioned in your chart. So someone like you with a 9 position, like in the life path number, it makes you inherently a generous kind of a big-hearted person, someone that has a lot of warmth and generosity and a sense of giving and a sense of natural altruism. But there's a twist because you have an 18-9. So yours is a 9 made of 1 and 8, 18, which gives it that extra fire and intensity because 1 and 8 they're go-getters. Okay, they have a certain intensity to them, so it's a
Mm-hmm.
more fiery 9, right? If you compare it to, let's say, a 9 made of 27, which is much more of an altruistic, spiritual kind of 9 because of the 2 and the 7. But the 1 and 8, it's much more of a fiery and a much more passionate type of 9. Okay, so
And
there's
that's
not
so
much more we can say about that, but
and it's so interesting that you said 18-9 because I was told that I was a 27-9. So I have been thinking that.
interesting.
And it's interesting because when I listened to your podcast of 27-9, I was like, oh, that's so me. I mean, I feel like this.
You know
I
what?
don't
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
know,
Like,
but I know there are different ways of calculating it. So that's interesting. There are different
true.
ways, right? So,
There are different ways.
but
Yes,
I
there are different.
definitely have the 1 and the 8 energy as well. So I was thinking, well, that
Any
applies too.
anyhow, yes, and I mean anyhow, we know you have like a 7, which is a 16 7 and a
Totally.
19 1. So you have a lot of 7 and 1 are also they're very distinct numbers. They're super individualistic and they're led by the number 1, both of them in the
Yeah.
tens. Okay, so you have that intensity of the
Yeah,
1,
regardless, the
even
one
if we
is
leave the
very
9 aside.
strong. I know it
Yes,
is. It definitely
yes,
has a big presence. And you mentioned that I think it was in the 16-7. So my soul urge of being a 7, a
right.
16-7, which I never looked at actually. I never looked into the 16, which also is a karmic debt number, right? The fault
Powerful
of the
number.
ego.
Yes, karmic debt, but also powerful number.
I know it all too well. The death of the ego over and over again, I swear. But that one is also an expression number one. So
Yes,
I have
yes,
that powerful energy that I can just get lost in. Like it can completely take
sure.
over sometimes. And you did mention one of the traits about that that really hit home, that I was thinking, oh yeah, I need to fix that. I need to work on that. Because the one can come in and just be so impulsive and strong
Yes.
and just completely
Aggressive in their
override,
ways.
aggressive.
Yes.
And I'm so aware of it, but in the moment, in the heat of the moment, it takes over completely. So I need to really, well, I'm aware. I'm aware of it, but yeah, it's very true. And it really
Yeah, I
resonates.
mean, and it's a process. I mean, what I love about numerology is that it's not static.
Mm-hmm.
You look at your chart and it's like a birth stamp, but that birth stamp, despite accompanying you to your last breath, it's still going to be an evolution. You're not going to be the same, 9 life path 10 years from now. You
Mm-hmm.
are not the same 9 life path 10 years ago. That chart that we see, our numerology chart is our life process. It's the energies that constitute our, not only our personality, and by the way, our personality and our life lessons are, everything is dynamic. Even our character is dynamic. I mean, just think about yourself 20 years ago and think about yourself today. I mean, you changed. So the core qualities remained the same, but they've evolved. You've polished yourself, you've refined yourself, you grew up. So like a 7 or whatever, I don't know, let's use another number we didn't mention yet. Let's say number 5. Number 5 is a lot about freedom and experimentation and exploration of life's experiences, like gathering a lot of experience through trying things out. Now, if I'm a less experienced 5, I'm younger, I might not know where my boundaries are. I may say yes to things I should say no, and no to things I should say yes. So I may cross my own boundaries, but as I grow up, I may reach a point where I can express my number 5 in a much more mature way. I can still be a very outgoing, free bird, but I will be able to utilize that energy in a much more accurate, refined manner. So we evolve. And same goes for looking at our chart as the circumstances that we're going to encounter again and again in order to really master the intention of our soul. It's an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm. And we also
Yes.
can't forget that there's the numerology aspect, there's the astrology aspect, but there's still also that unique flavor that we have that is our own, that is completely aside from the charts and the readings that but I find that understanding this part of ourselves gives us an even deeper glimpse into many aspects of ourselves.
Yes. So true. I mean, you touched upon I think like an immensely important point. I always tell my students, I think, actually before talking about my students, I think before anything else, I'm a Dharma teacher, right? I teach spiritual wisdom. And for me, like numerology or astrology, um, we must remember that these are methodologies. No methodology can capture or encapsulate, your entirety. It tries to create some kind of, map. It starts to map out some, traits or energies to help you understand yourself. But in the end of the day, you are a soul, you are consciousness, and that's, in terms of, this, you can look at it like a Russian doll, like the ultimate, is soul, is consciousness. And within that, there's the smaller doll, which is numerology or a methodology to kind of navigate that. But it is fascinating when you give numerology readings and you see people with very, very similar charts. And the way these charts play out is so different. And it really comes to show that there's that soul element, like that. You cannot know at what level of evolution the soul that embodies that particular chart, which represents their unique energy body, physical body, character and circumstances, what level that soul is going to be. Maybe it's a super, mature soul. Maybe it's a rather young soul. And that will have a great impact on how the person will utilize the potentials of the numbers, but also how they will address the shadows of their numbers. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. And it's also humbling. Like, you approach numerology, I think as a numerologist and also as an astrologer, you approach this with a lot of humbleness. You have an idea, but you also don't know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it is good to be honest with yourself. And truthfully, I've gone into my chart. I can reread some of the aspects and it will align with me more in a different time than if I would have read it before. So, as we're always evolving, there are some points that will resonate with us differently at a certain period in our life that will help us maybe through something that we're going through, or maybe we've matured. But it is really, I feel, important to be, one, to be open-minded, but two, to be honest. When we read these things, we may gloss over the shadow, which I actually want to talk about next, is how to use numerology to navigate the shadow aspects of ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And that's what also really captured my attention when you first invited me to do this podcast together. And I was checking you out and oh wow, Tara, wow, she's into shadow work. And I was wow, not many people have that courage or that kind of sincerity or honesty to really take a good look at themselves. I think very often the new age or the spiritual scene of our days really tries to focus too much on positive affirmations, not realizing that actually a lot of our intrinsic potential, true power, and and even liberation potential lies in looking at our shadows, not marginalizing them, not outcasting them, actually really inviting them in, and by doing so releasing so much light and freedom into our conscious existence. So yeah, I'm super happy to talk about that. That's
well, I love how you don't just focus only on numerology. You have the Dharma practice, right? You work with the whole self, which definitely I feel is so valuable and so wonderful. That's why we can have these conversations. Also, it goes into all these other realms of existence. It's not just the one thing, even though it's all connected. But yeah, let me explain a little bit about your perception on the shadow. And it's sort of this double-edged sword practice, working on self-development and, people practicing manifestation and law of attraction and spiritual enlightenment. And there's a lot of teaching and practice to put our mind into a programmed state of positivity or constructiveness or confidence or focus, which does hold true. But there's also the aspect of ourselves that needs deep exploration to understand ourselves more, because the result of our manifestation, the result of our life, the result of relationships and how we feel is a construct of our deeper understanding and wisdom from within. So I'd love to hear, a little bit about that from your side.
So, I mean, the way I approach it is, if you you know what, I'll use a certain example from numerology, in terms of I'll use a number to kind of demonstrate this topic. So when I teach number 3, okay, the pros and the cons, so to speak, the light and the shadow. So number 3 is very creative and full, brimming with ideas. Number 3 is so open and so it's always reminds me of Mercury, in astrology. So it's full of, the neurons are super active. They're so receptive to information. They're so interested. They love learning all the time. And they're playful, and there's something innocent about their ways. But there's a shadow there. And the shadow of number three, interestingly, is that they very often don't learn from mistakes.
Hmm.
So why am I giving that as an example? Because when it comes to, let's say, relationships, then let's say I find a partner and he's a really nice guy, and we date, and it seems super promising. And I tell my best friends that, wow, you can't imagine what I found, like just an incredible guy, and he's so this and so that. And a year goes by and you break up, and you sit with your friends and you tell them, I don't understand, like I was sure he's the one, and I was sure, all these things. I don't know what happened there. He turned out to be this and that. Okay, 2 months pass by, you meet a new guy.
Oh my
Again,
God,
you go
this
to your
sounds like my story already.
really.
I have a birthday
You
treat.
have two
Oh
trees
no.
there in your chart, but they're not that central. But I mean,
I know
you
where
you
you're
meet the
going
new
with this.
guy.
I'm sorry I had
Really?
to.
You know where it's going?
Keep
So
going.
it's like,
Oh,
you meet the
keep
new
going.
guy and you go to your friends and you say like, oh, you won't believe it. No, like Josh, he's nothing like John. He's like so this and so kind. He's so understanding and blah, blah, blah. 6 months into the relationship, 8 months into the relationship, it's like the same issues pop up. A year goes by, you break up. You sit with your friends, and then again, I'm giving the example of number three. You're sitting there and you're saying like, I don't understand. How come it's like the same thing happened all over again? I just don't understand. There's no questioning. I just don't understand. Again, 2 months pass. I go into another relationship. Same story, same story. Third time, breakup. And then I sit with my friends. I don't understand. I'm simply so unlucky with men. I don't understand. There's no like self-reflection. Why is this happening to me? How am I contributing to this? What are my deeper motives that I'm not aware of that constantly lead me into the same situation? So that's very typical three, to do that in that particular way. Each number has its shadow, right? 7 can be super arrogant, think they know everything, speak as if they're already here while they're actually here, like because they have the ability to understand. They think they've already realized something because they've already like understood something in their mind, but to realize it has to be fully embodied. So they can be very arrogant. Every number has their shadow, but in the context of what we're talking about, like it's so important that we investigate ourselves, that we ask the real questions, like, hey, like what's going on with my life? Why am I experiencing depression, anxiety, a sense of meaninglessness? Or why do my relationships seem to not work time and time again? Why are they so dysfunctional? Why is my work not fulfilling me? There's so many questions we need to ask ourselves, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Like because there's ancestral trauma, or collective shadow. I don't want to even use the word trauma necessarily. Shadow. And that shadow informs every action, every decision, everything we do. And so numerology in that way, to a degree, is a shortcut, not in terms of resolving the shadow, or kind of like illuminating the shadow, or shedding light, but it can reveal the shadow we're dealing with, and that's a big deal. It gives it a name, and I think it's so important to give something a name. You're dealing with a problem of arrogance and emotional, let's say, harshness. Okay, let's say if that's part of that, not you. I'm saying like one deals with that, and if we speak about that, it may send you thinking. Kind of like it may send you to a place of reflection, a place of taking inventory and really asking yourself, yeah, maybe that's like why I've been rejected many times, or why my last two partners, broke up with me, or why my boss and I tend to get into fights and disagreements, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense? Does it,
So absolutely
at
does.
least
Yeah.
does
I
it like
mean,
start answering the question, or
yes, I'm still laughing in my head from the you had to pick the three example, and I
no,
had
really,
to
I don't know. I just,
really call me out on
it's,
that
there's
one.
something humoristic about the three. I mean, and by the way,
It's
three
pretty
is a
funny.
number of humor, by the way.
I know. I know. Well, you know what? If we don't have humor and if we can't laugh at ourselves, then it just we
Yes,
need a
then
bit of that. We need a bit of that.
we need all of this,
So
absolutely.
totally,
Yes.
I know because
Yes.
it does get funny after a while. You can't help
It
but
does. It does.
laugh
I
a
mean, come
bit.
on, we're all in the same boat. I mean,
Hmm.
really, we're all in the same boat, just trying to make our way, through rather challenging life. Life is not a Luna Park. It's not in Hebrew. We always say life is not a picnic. You know,
Hmm.
so in Israel, it's like a saying: life is
Hmm.
not a picnic. You have to work your way through.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true.
Yes.
So, speaking of the collective, do you want to discuss quickly the 2000s, the coming into the 2000s shift that we are going through?
Ooh, fascinating one. And I may have a bit of a different twist on that. So, so we've all been for at least 1,000 years, right? When we were in the thousands, right? In the 1,000s, sorry. Everyone born during that time for 1,000 years had to have at least one time the number one in their date of birth, right? If I was born the year 1001 or 1002, I had the leading one. It enters my birth date. And the one is it represents really the masculine or the young, yin and yang. So the young, the masculine energy, the initiative, the piercing into new territory, discovery, um, but also innovation, but also like the piercing, the aggressive, the not looking left and right kind of energy, super decisive, not very emotional. Again, looking at the light and the shadow. And we have shifted and still are shifting because these shifts are tectonic shifts. They're huge, they take time. So I would say we haven't fully shifted yet into the 2000s energy, like the two. I would say it'll take us another 100 years or so to really, really kind of settle into
Mm.
that two energy fully. So I think that the shift into that two puts much more collective emphasis, not only on those that are born with the two in their date of birth, but on all of us. It literally changes the energy in the collective field with like, it kind of like puts more focus on the two energy. And the two is a 180 degrees kind of like U-turn from number one, because we're shifting into an energy that is much more emotion based, um, more receptive, intuitive. I would say more, what's the word I'm looking for? Introverted energy. So there are those who will say, and I was one of them a while ago, who said, wow, we're shifting into this age of like sensitivity, and like two is, some would say, is less egoic or egocentric, like number one, and more sensitive and caring and kind. So we can kind of like imagine that we're shifting into this like very promising time. Now, I would say it can go that way, but it's not an ultimate promise. And I'll explain. Two, every number, as we already mentioned, has a light and a shadow. Two also has a shadow. And we need to be very, very clear about it. Two can be very, very indecisive, and therefore not able to deal with pressure, collapse under pressure, be somewhat deceptive, sometimes even a liar under pressure, Two can be very dualistic in its approach. Two can move into a place where emotion is all that matters. If I feel this way, therefore it is true. Period. There's no reality anymore. I feel this way, therefore it is true. This can be a danger.
Mm-hmm.
And we see already some of those expressions out there. Like people put a lot of emphasis on what they feel, or mental illness. Number two, psychological imbalances. Number two, it very much depends what we do with it. So, and also it's important to remember that as we transition into the 2000s, which give us that, open up that doorway into the two energy that can really be beautiful and so much more caring and uniting. Let's also not forget that we're not just like abandoning the one. The one has been integrated into our being. It's not just like disappearing out of existence. So there's this question of, if we are moving into the positive side of number two, we can actually utilize the strength, and the intensity of number one to really usher us into a wonderful new time. But we can also use the one energy that is already integrated into us collectively, and to really misuse the energy of number two. So now I have a lot of focus on my emotions, and I utilize my aggression of number one to simply force my emotional view on the world and on people because I feel in a certain way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
So
I like that perspective. And you're right. Even with when we move into, I wonder if it also applies to astrology. When I've heard from astrologers, different theories about even cusp signs, or at this date you're going to have Mercury retrograde or Saturn retrograde. But all of these energies have flux and flow and transitions and integrations. It's not
yes,
just all at this date you're going to
no,
have this happen to you and your life is
no.
going to change in whatever way. And there's so much information going around, and I talk about this every now and then about I call it clickbait out there about your life is going to drastically change, or this is going to happen, or Saturn is moving into Pisces, and this, and
Yes.
there's truth to that because things will change naturally, and it's good to be aware. But there's all the overlaps of these experiences and the integration and the how it's going to affect you personally, because we're all different as well. So there are all these different components happening. So I really respect what you said about that. Yeah, it's a tectonic shift, and
It's a
it's not
tectonic shift.
it's not overnight thing. And there
No.
is the overlap between the two energies. And even when I look at my personal month numbers, I can start feeling the energy shifting well before the end of the month. When I go
Yes.
into a new month, it starts getting a little bit different, and I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, I can feel something starting to change. And so there is that I feel like we all need to really, that I should actually phrase it differently. I feel that it's so important to develop that self-awareness of how are you feeling through this time. Most importantly, what are you sensing, what are you noticing, how is your body changing, how is your mind changing, how are your emotions changing? Because through that deeper development, that's where you get your answers. It's not going to come from someone telling you that on this day expect this change to happen for you.
Sure.
Because we also have free choice and free will. And if we're not feeling so
There
good
you
about
go.
making a decision in our life, we might miss that, and maybe not miss it or change it, So it's so
Yes.
abstract that way. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I think that it's also more free, and we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
make ourselves into like we're not some kind of machine,
Mm-hmm.
If we were a machine, then like every number in numerology would say, oh, this is going to happen to you, this is not going to happen to you, like 1 0, like a very very like predictable system, but there's always that element of unpredictability about us. We are alive. We are really alive. And so there's always the element of choice. We can say there are some things you cannot choose. For example, the sun rises, period. Like nobody asks you, nobody cares. It's gonna, it's shining its rays, but you can either enjoy it, you can, pull the curtains because you don't want the light to come in, whatever. There's a certain like way for you to interact with what is and what happens. So moving into the 2000s, for example, as long as we as humanity will not, and this maybe perhaps I'm tying here the Dharma teachings with numerology. It's like, as long as we as an individual, we do not transform our interior, right, into a progressively more egoless existence, we will use any energy, a 1 or a 2 or whatever number, in an egoic way. So there's nothing wrong about number 1. Number 1 is solidifying, consolidating, giving us that sense of stability and like unification of will. 1 is not bad. 1 is not aggressive necessarily if we do not function from an egoic perspective. 2, on like conversely, is not good if we are moving into it with a lot of ego, right? So this is where we have to, I think, like when I train numerologists, I always, I try to kind of like instill that spiritual awareness. Like that's, I believe, our jobs as numerologists and astrologers, right? It's like our job is not just to tell people, oh, the sun is going to rise and the moon is going to be this, whatever. Mercury is going into your this house or that sign. It's like to really give a bigger context of transformation and possibility. We're shifting into the 2000s. We have an amazing opportunity to transform ourselves and then ride that incredible wave into a time of kindness, mutuality, seeing each other, caring for each other, a time of compassion, a time of cooperation, a time of unification and great bonding, where we really realize that we are connected, number 2, where we are like a family, where we are bonded. Number 2, that's an incredible possibility that is real. That is, for example, a real portal that is opened before us. But we have that's what life does for us. That's like, but then we have to step in.
We have the choice
50%.
if we want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Embody it.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's well said. All right. Yeah. Well, let's close here. And how can people find you? So I'm going to leave your information here with the podcast version, the YouTube video, but how can people get in touch with you if they're interested? You do readings as well as your programs sure. too, correct?
Yes. Yes. So I mean, my current services, I would say, is definitely giving numerology consultations. And right, there's a variety of consultations that can all be, read on my website. And then there's teaching numerology. So I think that's really my destiny is to be a teacher, on different levels. And I think that's really what I do best, and what I feel as a calling, right, a vocation. So one can also study numerology, whether they want to study it just, to enrich themselves or as a career. It's, that's up to the person, but we can study really in depth. And then there's like the self-study course. And I think the self-study course is great for people who don't feel, okay, I don't want to go like into this very, very deep, prolonged journey, but I want to have like a basic education in numerology, which, by the way, I think is amazing, because if more people have that basic education, parents can understand their children. Children can understand their parents. Partners can understand each other so much better. It's just this basic, like understanding of each other, what we're meant to do, what we're meant to be, right? It's so that can also be found on my website. So one can just look into my website and see all of those things I mentioned. So readings, self-study course, in-depth numerology studies, and then for those who want to just like open up to the world of numerology and are not so familiar, then I have my numerology podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's called, I think you can find it like on many platforms like Spotify for sure, Apple Podcasts for sure, and I think many others. So it's called Numerology, GPS for the Soul.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful
Um,
podcast. I love it.
yeah, thank you.
Well, and I
And
can tell that you are a great teacher. So, yeah, I'm happy to leave information below and support you in any way possible because I really do see the value in it. And as I mentioned, it's really opened my eyes to a lot about myself. And through the awareness, then we create greater understanding and change within ourselves. So there's really no end to this journey of self-exploration. It's a constant journey
constant.
of self-discovery, but it's so fascinating. And I don't know, I just really love numerology. It's really, I feel like I've been able to connect with myself deeper because of it. I feel it goes into a bit more of my core being more than I found astrology personally. That's just me. That was my experience.
Hmm.
So everyone listening and watching, get in touch with Tom. Podcast is wonderful, and your programs, yeah, I'm sure they're fantastic. So, thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
much.
thank you for your kindness, and thank you for your lovely, lovely, heartwarming words. It's very touching, and it's such a joy to connect.
It has been absolutely. Thank you
Yeah,
again for being here and sharing all of your
thank
incredible
you,
information. It was wonderful.
thank you.